Hello people, how you doing? This is the second part of video studying this book, Literary Criticism from Plato to the Present, an introduction by M.A.R. Habib. So, in previous video we talked about Plato, his philosophy system, physics and metaphysics, and how he perceived these two things. And now we're gonna study Plato on poetry in his work Ion. So, bear with me. Plato's most systematic comments on poetry occur in two texts, separated by several years. The first is Ion, where Socrates cross-examines a rhapsode, a singer, and an interpreter called Ion on the nature of his art. The second, more sustained commentary occurs in the Republic. In the Ion, Socrates points out that the rhapsode, like the poet himself, is in a state of divine possession, and speaks not with his own voice, which is merely a medium through which a god speaks. So, here again, we're dealing with the same thing that Plato, in the previous video that we talk about it. So Plato says that poets themselves don't know what they're talking about, in simple terms, and they can only write a poet, come up with a poet based on an inspiration, and that inspiration is something given by the power divine. So without that power divine, they cannot come up with their poems or be inspired. And also, when they are inspired by that subject or whatever it can be, they try to descend the subject from its metaphysical form, which lives in a land of absolutism, like a concept or even a form, as we discussed in a previous video. Then, based on that inspiration, they go out of their senses, they go out of their mind. And that's how they come up with a poem. When they write the poem, they give it to the rhapsode. So, rhapsode is the guy who memorized the poems and then they say it out loud or sing it out loud for the people. Here, we have two levels of deterioration. So, the justice or the muse or whatever the subject was has been deteriorized to something which is not even close to the absolute idea or form of justice. I mean, if we consider the subject as justice, the subject can be anything. When it comes into poetry, you can choose a brick and talk about it and write a poem on it. Doesn't matter. So, as he says it here now, where was I? Oh, yeah. In a state of divine possession, he's talking about the rhapsode, and he speaks not with his own voice, which is merely a medium through which a god speaks. The muse inspires the poet, as we said now, who in turn passes on this inspiration to the rhapsode, who produces an inspired emotional effect on the spectators. So, yeah, the poet writes down the poet, gives it to the rhapsode, and rhapsode here again, based on Plato's, he is also out of his mind. And the thing that rhapsode does here is that it kind of stimulates your passions. In a way, he sings the poem to make you emotional, to affect on you. That's what the rhapsode does here. So, Socrates likens this process to a magnet, which transmits its attractive power to a series of iron rings, which in turn pass on the attraction to other rings, suspended from the first set. Here. Now he's using an analogy, Socrates, yes, it was Socrates, Now he's using an analogy in order to explain his idea. Well, imagine that metaphysic and physic. The metaphysic, the idea, the form, or the absolute thing, is that magnet. And when the poet is inspired, that inspiration of the poet becomes the first ring. Okay, I'm explaining this based on this analogy, okay? We're not talking about chains. So the first chain is the poet's inspiration, which the muse has been kind of sended to him as a notification, ding. And the second chain is the rhapsode, which makes the poem a little bit emotional in order to affect the audience. And the third chain would be audience themselves. Attractive power to a series of iron rings, which in turn pass on the attraction to other rings, suspended from the first set. The muse is the magnet or the lodestone. The poet is the first ring. The rhapsode is the middle ring, and the audience the last one. In this way, the poet conveys and interprets the utternesses of gods, and the rhapsode interprets the poets. So here something is transferred. They used to believe that poetry, as again we talked in the previous video, is something godlike. It's based on power divine. You know, the poet himself is just a deliverer, is just a delivery guy. And that delivery guy delivers something to the rhapsode, and rhapsode delivers that to the audience. It looks like a market system in a Greek kind of style, with philosophy combined with it. So, and the audience last one. In this way, the poet conveys and interprets the utternesses of the gods, and the rhapsode interprets the poet. Hence, the rhapsodes are interpreters of interpreters. See what's going on here? You know, here the rhapsode becomes the interpreters of the interpreters. We can use that allegory cave example by Plato. You know, when those guys are in the cave and they're watching the shadow of the reality, here is the scene. You know, the reality is something out there, the muse. One of them breaks free and goes and sees them. So you can consider that as the poet, as far as I can make sense of it, okay? And when he goes back to the cave to inform the others, well, bro, like there is a world out there, and the things that we're seeing here is only mere shadows. Physics, the world of physics. He has seen the metaphysics, and he now tries to tell them about it. This telling them deteriorizes into the world of physics. They've been already seeing it as the shadows. Here is a little bit, I think, paradoxical or ironic, because he himself, the poet, cannot understand it, but in the allegory of the cave, he has kind of achieved the power to see the metaphysic and grasp them as they are. Well, yeah, that's the paradoxical part. So this rhapsode, the interpreter of the interpreter, is doing the same thing that that guy which has seen the real thing. If you imagine the sun as the poet, and now the poet has actually lightened that rhapsode, and rhapsode is going to tell the audience. Who are the audience? The people who are in cave. I think this one is better. Yeah, that one is. Yeah, this one makes sense. Yeah, that one is better. So, the last sentence. Not only poetry, according to Socrates, but even criticism is irrational and inspired. Hence, in this early dialogue, Plato has already sharply separated the provinces of poetry and philosophy. The former has its very basis in a divorce from reason, which is the realm of philosophy, poetry in its very nature is steeped in emotional transport and lack of self-possession. So now here Plato says that poetry is something which is based on inspiration. So when we are talking of inspiration, it means that mind and senses and logic have nothing to do with it. On the other hand, in the realm of philosophy, the very first thing that we need is logic and mind, a logical mind. This is the separation that Plato made between poetry and philosophy. And one of the reasons that he does not like poetry is because he says that there is no logic in it. People are losing their minds. That's why he doesn't like poetry. So we study two paragraphs based on Plato's point of view on poetry in his work, The Ion. I hope that's informative for you. The thing that I try to do in these videos is just to show you the way to encourage you in order to study more and grasp the ideas, the basic ideas, in order to deepen and enhance your studies, especially if you're studying English literature, which one of the most important things in literature, English literature, or totally in literature or humanities as general, is to know criticism, is to know the history of criticism, how it works, what are the ideas, what are the theories, what are the philosophies. I hope this was informative, and I try to record more often. I'm a little bit still shy in front of the camera, as you can see. Have a nice day, guys. Bye.